Good Wednesday afternoon to you. I hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. Cavs officially at the All-Star break, All-Star weekend. Here in Cleveland, we will talk with Cavs beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, Chris Fedor. A little later in the show, we begin, though, by talking Browns football. Let's take a look. Pro Football Focus gives us best and worst case scenarios for all 32 teams as we look at the 2022 season. For the Browns, best case scenario, get Baker Mayfield a new pass catcher, make the defensive line priority number 2. Worst case scenario, overpay impending free agents, such as Jadeveon Clowney, avoid a wide receiver in round 1 of the 2022 NFL Draft. With that, let's welcome in Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. And Mac, I don't think that worst case scenario, if you sign Clowney, I don't see another way of I don't see another venue other than going out and getting a wide receiver with that 13th pick.
Yeah, and Dave, you look at the options that they have there at the 13th pick. You know, the amount of receiver talent that you see in this draft is quite frankly remarkable. Over the last couple of seasons, you've seen a lot of great receivers come out of college. But, you know, again, I look at somebody like Treylon Burks, who I'm personally a big fan of. But even, you know, there's others that are big fans of Drake London. You obviously have, you know, the Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave duo from Ohio State. You have a lot of receiving talent there. But to be honest, I don't think that there's, you know, a wrong answer when it comes to those receivers. But at the same time, I think there's a couple of interesting prospects I think you can mix in there as well. I know it's not the sexy answer, but again, with, you know, J.C. Tretter's contract getting up there a little bit, you know, you have Nick Harris. I could see them possibly going with the center, but at the same time, again, you know, you have that a lot of questions when it comes to that defensive line as well. You know, I think that if they go down that road, that could be a possibility. If they don't bring back Jadeveon Clowney, that could be a possibility at edge. But, you know, again, I think that when it comes to this draft class, it makes a lot of sense for them to go receiver, and I do think that they will. But, again, it just comes down to the right fit for the team.
The other thing I would say is it will be pretty clear by what they do in free agency, what they're thinking in terms of the draft. The one thing that I'm concerned about a little bit, tell me your thoughts on this. They got to go and get a true guy that they feel can develop into a number 1 receiver. So I'm not as excited about seeing who might fall and who they could potentially get late in the first round by trading back in or in the second round. Go get a guy that's a stud that threatens defenses.
Yeah, no, and Dave, I look back to, you know, in comparison, the Jedrick Wills draft, where, again, you knew the Browns needed an offensive tackle. They didn't really address it in free agency, but what did they do? They had a ton of options that were sitting there for them at number 10. They ended up going with their favorite option, Jedrick Wills, and Wills has been developing ever since. And that's the one thing that I look at this receiving core where, you know, even when they had Odell on this team, you know, you see Odell on a championship team is a number 2. And I think that he can be a very good number 2, clearly. But, you know, again, I don't think that you have a clear number 1. And even in a good year where he's not hurt, I think Jarvis Landry is a number 2 on a championship team. So, you know, I think that the Browns are missing that true top number 1 option. And I don't think you're going to get it in free agency. So I think your best bet is taking one of these receivers, building him into be your number 1, and then at that point, building the rest of your receiving core around that player.
All right, we've got a number of voicemails to get to. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This caller has an idea of how he thinks the Browns offseason should unfold. Let's listen.
Hi, my name is Phil. I'm calling about the Browns offseason with some ideas to help the offense. I want to hear your thoughts. First, the Browns, you know, unfortunately have to cut loose Jarvis. His production, his injury, and age are a factor, and his $15 million contract is just not tenable at this time. Then, in free agency, I'd like to see the Browns go after Christian Kirk, a veteran stud receiver, with some of that Jarvis money. Draft Treylon Burks, or if you have to get Garrett Wilson as option number 2, that gives us Burks or Garrett on the outside, along with DPJ. And then Kirk in the slot. Sounds like a dangerous wide receiver group, in my opinion. Then there are some good-looking right tackles on day 2 of the draft, such as OSU's Pettit-Fier, meaning, you know, you're going to have to cut Jack Conklin as he's just breaking down health-wise and for cap reasons. And with that cap money, we can address David Njoku and get him an extension. then get back a healthy Baker Mayfield. Appreciate the time, and thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, so a lot to unpack there. What I would say about, you know what, it's pretty well thought out. I would say if Jarvis Landry is willing to renegotiate at a lower dollar figure, you have that conversation. I don't know that he's going to want to do that. Quite honestly, I don't know that he really still wants to be here. We'll find out. That's something that will unfold. You can't pay Jarvis Landry $15 million, and I like the idea of using that money to go get a number one. Not sure Conklin is breaking down. I mean, we'll see. And I like the idea of signing Njoku, and Mac, you and I have talked about this. He's a matchup problem. Use him.
Yeah, no, and you're completely spot on when it comes to Njoku and, you know, the idea of Landry. I'm right there with you. You know, you have that conversation with him. If he's willing to, you know, take a little bit less money this year, then look, I'm all for it. I'd love to have Jarvis Landry back. But at the same time, I just don't see that happening for Jarvis Landry at this point in his career. So, you know, I think that for him, I think that he's probably going to end up being let go. Excuse me. But, you know, looking at a Christian Kirk and unpacking it a little bit, I like Christian Kirk. The only thing is that I feel like, again, it's similar to kind of Jarvis, where I think that he can be a number two on a team. You know, this past year, it was the most receiving yards that he's had in a season with 982. Previously, it was only around 700 at that point. So, you know, I'm curious as to how much of a workload he can handle at that point. But at the same time, too, I also look at free agency as adding those supplementary pieces. You know, I don't think that you're going to get your number one in free agency. I think you're going to be looking at the draft for that. And that's where I look at somebody like a Russell Gage that I would rather bring in from Atlanta. He played well towards the end of the season. But, again, I look at what they need to do. I'm right there with him when it comes to Treylon Burks. Again, like I said, I'm a big Treylon Burks guy. I'd love to have him here in Cleveland. But, you know, I look at what he also mentioned on day two. Regarding the offensive tackle situation, I'm concerned when it comes to Jack Conklin because of the injury history that he's had. So, you know, I would be willing to bring somebody in. However, I do worry at the development process when it comes to some of these tackles and how ready they're going to be day one to replace somebody at a Conklin's level. So that's where I have some concerns regarding that. But at the same time, too, Dave, you know my thoughts on David Njoku. You know, I'd love to have him back. He's somebody who I think it has been the best tight end that they've had over the last two seasons, at least. And so he's somebody who I would love to see them bring back. And to be honest, I'd also love to see them add maybe another tight end, you know, towards the end of the draft or even in free agency as well.
Yeah, you're going to laugh at this. I think they kind of underutilized him. I think, again, he's a guy that if you get the right matchups, you can exploit. He's got to hang on to the ball a little bit more. All right, before we go to break, found this one interesting. So each of the last 16 quarterbacks who have lost their Super Bowl debut have never returned to the Super Bowl. Now, you look at the list there: Garoppolo, Goff, Ryan, Newton, Kaepernick, Grossman, McNabb, you know, Gannon, Kerry Collins, McNair, Joe Burrow. I take Joe Burrow over all of them. What this just goes to show you is it's really hard to get to the Super Bowl. You know, Dan Marino's another one. Made it early in his career, never got back. So don't assume because Joe Burrow and he's got all those weapons, don't assume he's going back to the Super Bowl every year.
Yeah, and especially you look at the AFC, it's not like it gets any easier. You know, you just had Ben Roethlisberger retire, but you have Justin Herbert there to replace him. You still have Patrick Mahomes, not to mention Josh Allen coming into his own. So it's not like it's a cakewalk and he's in his own separate conference. No, he's going through the gauntlet every single year. So that's where, you know, I think that to say that Joe Burrow, oh, he's going to be back there, don't worry about it. Look, it's easier said than done. And on top of that, you know, you also have to have the pressure on Mike Brown this offseason, the owner, where, you know, again, you have that offensive line that has to be upgraded. And so at that point, that costs money. You know, this is the team that it was the joke before the season began about having the microphones on a TV stand that they brought up. You know, it's a team that's notorious for not spending money. And they don't even have a scouting staff. You know, they just utilize their coaching staff to do that. They save money there. So, you know, it comes down to doing the right moves and building the team along. And there's so many different factors that comes into it every single year. It's easier said than done, but if there's anybody, like you mentioned, anybody on that list, I'm trusting Joe Burrow to overcome that. The guy got sacked 70 times this year, for Christ's sake. Like, come on. So I think that if there's anybody to do it, I think it's Joe Burrow. But like you said, it's easier said than done to get back there.
And the other thing I'll say about that, you mentioned the offensive line. There was the big debate. Do you take the wide receiver? Do you take the left tackle and Penei Sewell? They went with Jamar Chase. It was a pretty good decision. Take notes, Browns. Go get it. Go get a wide receiver that threatens defenses. So that's how we're bringing it back to the Browns. Mac Robinson and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, we head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Viewer wants to talk wide receivers. We'll get into some mock drafts. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Life is getting back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for spring classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns Combine right around the corner. Then it's the start of the league year where free agents can begin to be signed and talked to. That's about a month away. And then it's the draft in April. We're going to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This viewer has some ideas about who he wants the Browns to draft.
Hi, I'm Jerry. I'm a lifelong Browns fan. And my comment is, since the Browns were 28th in passes attempted in the NFL, but they were tied for 7th in the number of passes dropped by receivers in the NFL. I think we should spend both rounds, first and second rounds, on receivers, and I'd like to see them get Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave from Ohio State. Let's get some people that have played together and build up some camaraderie that way. That's my thought, and I'm sticking to it. Bye.
All right, appreciate all of the voicemails and keep voicemailing us. Mac, I can certainly understand Garrett Wilson. The thing I would say is, remember, I'm thinking you're going to sign a veteran type receiver. And I'm not saying you shouldn't take a couple in the draft. I wouldn't go 1 and 2. There are too many other needs. And I just don't think the way the Browns value the passing game and the wide receiver position, I don't think they're spending 2. I would certainly make sure I get 1 at 13, I believe, unless I sign some stud wide receiver in free agency.
Yeah, for me, it's unless Chris Godwin or Devonta Adams are walking through that door, I'm spending a pick at 13 on wide receiver. So, just getting that out of the way first thing. But, like you mentioned, there's a lot of other needs on this team. The only 2 defensive tackles that are on this roster for 2022 currently are Jordan Elliott and Tommy Togiai at this point. That's the only 2. That's all you've got. So, you have other needs on this roster that are pressing. So I don't think that they should go 1-2 as much as I think it's a glaring need. There's other options in this draft as well. Somebody that I'm a fan of out of Nevada, Romeo Doubs. He was somebody who was at the Senior Bowl. I like him quite a bit. I think that, there's other options that I think that you can go after and that I think that you can bring in. So, I think that there's a lot of very talented receivers that I think that you could bring into this team. I like Garrett Wilson. He's not quite my number one. Like I said, I'm a big Treylon Burks guy. I think that Wilson's a little bit skinnier than what I would go for when it comes to receivers. But at the same time, I think that when it comes to these receivers, I think it's going to be interesting to see how they fit. And not just, okay, let's pull these two players because they played together at that point. I know you want the camaraderie, but at the same time, just because they played together in college doesn't mean that they'll fit together well in the NFL. And that's where I think that you need to look at, again, skill sets, how they fit in the offense, and building the team out from there. And that's where, again, I look at free agency as a way to supplement, that receiving core. It's where you get guys that, you don't really have that kind of a skill set, even somebody, and again, depending on the price ranges, this is kind of just putting that out there first. But, I think that looking at somebody like a Michael Gallup who could stretch the field in that sense, that's something that I think that I looked at on this roster because you don't really have somebody who can be that field stretcher on this team. But it's looking at the different skill sets more than anything. And that's where I look at, again, each of these different receivers that you have. It depends on how they fit in the Kevin Stefanski offense. And like you said about David Njoku, it's about utilizing these guys when you get them and finding out how to use these guys. That's the difference between having guys that are just talented and then being able to utilize them in correct ways.
All right, let's take a look at a couple of mock drafts that are out today. So Todd McShay, ESPN.com, has the Browns taking Garrett Wilson, and he says whether or not Baker Mayfield's still the plan at quarterback for the Browns. Offense is begging for some pass catchers, and Wilson would immediately give Mayfield a playmaker. What we know, he can, body control, adjust the pass in the air, sudden route runner, fantastic speed and acceleration. The interesting thing here, Mac, is wide receiver is a lot like tackle was a couple years ago when they had the 10th pick. And they went Jedrick Wills. There's 4 or 5 of them that were bunched up near the top. It's the same thing with wide receivers. So, let's see if they can identify who fits the Browns system the best. We've talked a little bit about Garrett Wilson. I think locally there's some bias because he played for Ohio State.
Right. Yeah. And I tend to agree there because, again, like you said with that tackle class, you had guys that had different skill sets and really were different fits for different teams. That's where, again, Tristan Wirfs looks phenomenal in Tampa Bay right now. But that's also because he's a little bit more of an athletic tackle. And on top of that, they're keeping him on his right side. But you look at somebody like Mekhi Becton, who was coming out that year. Guys just big as hell, mammoth of a man when it comes to Mekhi Becton, 6'7", 360. Again, not necessarily going to be the same type of fit as a Tristan Wirfs, who is a little bit more agile, but he's smaller at around like 6'4", around like, I want to say like 310, I think is the different look when it came to Tristan Wirfs and Mekhi Becton. That's where I look at somebody like a Drake London who, I think that, my problem with Drake London, I don't think that he separates as well when it comes to him on the field. And I think that's what the Browns are going to be kind of looking at and looking for. So, that's why I look at somebody like a Treylon Burks, who he's not as big as a Drake London, who's 6'5". Burks is 6'3". He's got that bigger build where he's around like 215, but he's able to move well and run well. That's why I like him a little bit better. But again, you have somebody like Garrett Wilson who can be a great route runner, but he's a little bit smaller at 6 foot, around like 195. So again, it's all of these different players that all can be great in different schemes, but you have to get them in the right schemes. And like you said, it's about finding the right fit for this team. And that's why I look at somebody like a Treylon Burks, who I think could be somebody who could, again, take some of those end arounds that Kevin Stefanski likes to run. He's done those before. On top of, just getting the ball in space for him, I think that he can make a lot of people miss, and I think he could be that guy that the Browns could need. But like you said, a lot of different receivers that have different skill sets for this team that could be interesting.
All right, another mock draft, and you're going to like this one. Chris Trapasso from CBSSports.com. We've talked about him a couple of times. Treylon Burks. You see some A.J. Brown to him, 5X hands. Guys, if you haven't looked at him, go Google Treylon Burks. So there's a couple highlight reels out there, and I know the highlight reels are only going to show the best things. There are some things about him. For a big guy, he has some acceleration. Also interesting to note, Trapasso has the Giants trading for Calvin Ridley. Again, we've talked about him. I could see the Browns trying to get Calvin Ridley as a guy via trade. As somebody pointed out, that's the way they got Beckham. That's the way they got Jarvis Landry. There's a history, even though it isn't under Andrew Berry, of the Browns trading for established wide receivers.
Yeah, so to address the Treylon Burks part of it first, my favorite part about Burks is that, if you look up his tape and look up his games, his best games come against the best competition. And that's where I think that for him being in the SEC, stepping up against Alabama, stepping up against Auburn, against these tougher teams and tougher challenges for him, I think that's something that makes him stand out for me. And I look at him and I think that he's somebody who makes the biggest plays on the biggest stages when it comes to, his performances this year. So I think he stands out, and I think he can make that transition to the next level. I like him quite a bit. But I also go ahead and I look at, the Calvin Ridley side of it. I think that's an interesting move. I think that could be interesting for Andrew Berry because, again, more than anything, it's taking a look at situations and where can they help themselves here. Because, again, I think that Calvin Ridley, he's somebody who's, again, still on that rookie deal. So he's going to be a little bit more cost controlled. So I think that them bringing him in, taking him out of that Atlanta situation, kind of easing him in. Obviously, I believe he was out for half the season taking the mental health break. So, I think that for him, it's easing him along, making sure that he's all right. And, if they're able to bring him in and get some production out of him, that's phenomenal. And that's a great move by them at that point. So, again, I think that somebody like a Treylon Burks could be phenomenal. And, again, a Calvin Ridley, I could definitely see Andrew Berry jumping and capitalizing on a situation like that.
All right, before we take a break, time to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Browns offense.
My comment is about Cooper Kupp. He is a special kind of receiver. And what makes him so special is he has good hands. He has the confidence of the quarterback, and he's what we call a possession receiver, like Brian Brennan used to be for the Browns, and like Jarvis Landry is when he's not hurt. So I'm not so worried about replacing Odell Beckham Jr. If we lose Jarvis Landry, that would really put a wrinkle in Kevin Stefanski's offense because he's a possession type of coach. So he needs that sure-handed receiver. So the running games works. He loves going out of the backfield to Hunt when in the short passes to the tight end. All that works, but that you have to have that possession receiver like Jarvis Landry, that role that he's played. So I'm concerned if we don't retain Jarvis Landry, restructure his contract, get him healthy, we're going to need a guy, use that 13th pick. That's the kind of wide receiver that we need. So I'll listen to your comments. Thanks. Bye. This is Randall McKissack, a Cleveland Browns fan forever. Go Brownies.
All right, and I certainly appreciate the voicemails. Here's what I'd say about Jarvis Landry. Generally, you don't pay guys that work underneath as high as he's being paid. They brought him in on a contract that the Dolphins had negotiated. He's a really good number two. He would be more effective if he had somebody to stretch the field so he has more room to work underneath. Again, he's a really good receiver. He's been really good for the Browns. At $15 million, I don't know that it makes sense.
I agree. And that's where, the possession receiver, I get it to an extent, but at the same time, Jarvis has trouble winning on the outside. And that's the one thing that we have to keep on looking back at is that, again, I know he's a dependable receiver. I know that he's been great for the fans. Don't get it twisted there. But at the same time, I think that this team can, bring in somebody who can be a sure-handed player and somebody who, again, I think that, I look at somebody like Russell Gage that you can bring in, fill that slot type of a role because let's be honest, again, Jarvis's best years in the NFL have come when he's been utilized in the slot more so. So I look at somebody like a Russell Gage at that point, or even again, if you go out and trade for a Calvin Ridley, get somebody who can succeed on the outside there as well. I think that there are other options that you can go to, and especially for a much lower price at that point. Again, I love Jarvis, but at the $15 million mark, that's just too damn high for somebody who, again, didn't even crack the 500-yard mark last year. So, I understand that he was dealing with injuries, but again, I just think that, when he's fully healthy, yeah, I think that he can be good. But again, at that $15 million mark, that's where I take an issue with it. So again, I think that for Jarvis, I would love to have him back. But at the $15 million mark, I just don't see it working. And the comparison to Cooper Kupp, I disagree with, because Cooper Kupp is also much larger. He's faster. And on top of that, he's also phenomenal run blocker. That's the one thing that's underrated about him, is that he's willing to block in the run game. And that's why his touchdown, he faked going for a block in order to get the fade out for him. So, I look at him and I just think that, it's a difference when it comes to Jarvis Landry and Cooper Kupp, and it's a different skill set. And it's not just the one-to-one, one's a possession receiver. Cooper Kupp had an all-time great season. So again, I just think that when it comes to Jarvis and Cooper Kupp, I don't necessarily know if comparing them one-to-one is necessarily fair for either party.
Yeah, I would agree. Cooper Kupp won the Triple Crown and was the Super Bowl MVP. So, and he's a bigger target. All right, Mac Robinson and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, a couple more voicemails. We will also take a look at some projected contracts for free agent wide receivers. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. Mac Robinson and I continue talking Browns. Time to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Browns offense.
Hi, this is Anise Bonner calling you. I wanted to ask a question. Do we run the ball so much to cover up Baker Mayfield throwing ability, or do we run it because it's a part of who we are as a team and our philosophy and our scheme as a team?
All right. Again, appreciate the voicemail. And Mac, that is the identity. You run the ball, you set up play action. You have two of the best running backs in the league. So you run the ball because you have a really good offensive line and you have two really good running backs. But you still need to be able to throw the ball, especially late in games.
Yeah, and Dave, the other part that I look at is if you look back in 2020, what they would do is they would utilize the passing game at first to also open up the running lanes for them. And that's where, again, I look at what the Cleveland Browns have done in their identity. Again, you have Nick Chubb and you have Kareem Hunt. It's not like you're tossing the ball off to Duke Johnson like you would like 4 years ago. It's putting the ball in the hands of two of the top 10 running backs in the league. So, I'm not saying that they're going to be covering up Baker Mayfield's deficiencies. Out of anything, it's utilizing their strengths. They have two of their top running backs in the NFL, and Baker Mayfield at that point has a little bit of an easier time looking across the field, has a little bit easier time to find those matchups. It makes it easier for both sides. And again, like I said, you can also utilize the passing game as they did down the stretch and had much success in 2020, utilizing the passing game when Baker was healthy to go ahead and find those open targets. And then at that point, as the defense is on its heels and covering back against the pass, then at that point, you open up more running lanes for Nick Chubb, for Kareem Hunt, and that's where you saw those big chunk plays that kept the defense off guard.
All right, so let's take a look at some projected free agent wide receiver contracts. This is from Pro Football Focus. We'll do a couple of them at a time. So they say Mike Williams will sign for a projected 4 years, $68 million. $17 million per year, $38 guaranteed. Allen Robinson, 3 years, $48 million, $16 million per year, $30 guaranteed. And Michael Gallup, 2 years, $25 million, $12.5 per year, $14 million guaranteed. Important to note, Gallup coming off an ACL, which likely kind of pushes that down a little bit as far as the contract goes. When you look at those, that's the reason that paying a guy like Jarvis Landry $15 million or $15 million plus doesn't make sense. Because you're going to, in order to get a threat on the outside, a true number one, you're going to have to pay more than that.
Yeah, and that's the biggest difference is that on top of that, a lot of those guys, you mentioned Mike Williams, he had some great success on the outside, winning those jump balls. And at that point, that's something that you haven't necessarily seen from this receiving core. Mike Williams, I think, is an interesting case for somebody to sign in free agency. Again, I think that he's somebody who's a great red zone threat, great jump ball, contested catch type of receiver. I don't think that he's a fit here in Cleveland as well. Allen Robinson is somebody that I'm interested in. But I wonder, instead of the 3-year deal I know that they're projecting, I almost wonder if he would take almost a 1-year deal, with a little bit more guaranteed, and then at that point try to retest the market afterward. Because let's be honest, when it comes to Allen Robinson, and I'm not saying this because of my last name. I'm not saying that because I'm biased. I love Allen Robinson, but please God, get him some better quarterback play. Going back to college, he's played with Christian Hackenberg, Blake Bortles, Nick Foles, and Mitch Trubisky, and now a little bit of Justin Fields toward the end of last year. Again, Justin Fields might be the most talented player that he's played with, but at the same time, he also is still a rookie. He's still learning. And so at that point, again, all of these different quarterbacks that he's played with, I want to see what he can do with better quarterback play. And so, I think that he could be somebody who's interesting to bring in free agency. And then looking at Michael Gallup, I mentioned him earlier as well. I think that he's somebody who can stretch the field, especially. And you have to remember, he's not going to be a number one for you. He's going to be a great complementary piece. And again, it depends on what number he's going to end up taking. And that's where I'm curious as to see how much that ACL affects that contract number for him and how much he's going to be able to make this offseason going into that, with that being said.
All right, let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about Baker Mayfield.
Hi, I just wanted to talk a little bit about why Baker Mayfield is so polarized. We got to be honest, and the reason why is because a lot of the Cleveland Brown fans are Ohio State fans, and they still do not forgive him over the flag planting. That is why. They've been judging him since he got drafted, and they've been judging him since he got to Cleveland because of that. I don't know why you guys failed to mention it, or you don't know it. I don't know. But that is the reason why. Because they still can't forgive him over the flag planting. Now I know some of the Browns fans are going to say that, no, that's not true. We judge him on his performance, but no, that is not true. You judge him over the flag planting. That is why he is the most polarized. And the other comment I wanted to make was, it's been suggested to trade Kyler Murray for Baker Mayfield. Why would we want to do that when both of them are air raid quarterbacks? Both of them were trained under Cliff Kingsbury and Lincoln Riley. So we're this close to ruining Baker Mayfield's career, so now we're going to ruin Kyler Murray's career? Kyler Murray at least is running air raid at Arizona, which is what Baker Mayfield should be running over here. Instead, we're running Kevin Stefanski's patty cake offense. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate the call. First of all, the reason I haven't mentioned the flag planting thing is it happened so long ago. If people still hold that against Baker Mayfield, get over it. He was a college kid who won a huge game in a place nobody expected them to win. That's how he celebrated. Okay? If you're going to hold it against him, so be it. Buckeyes fans, if that pisses you off, don't lose to Oklahoma at home. Sorry.
Yeah.
And then as far as Kyler Murray goes, the one knock against Baker Mayfield's size and a lack of speed. Kyler Murray is the only person who has been drafted in the top 10 of the NFL draft and the Major League Baseball draft. So the athletic skill set is a little different. That's why the thought was to trade for Kyler Murray. Kevin Stefanski isn't ever going to run an air raid offense. And if you look at Cliff Kingsbury, if he doesn't start winning late in the season, he won't be either.
Yeah, and on the first point, you're spot on. If if you are holding against Baker Mayfield because of that stupid flag planting thing, get over it. It's a loser mentality, and I don't care. I don't want to hear it from you at that point. If you're still holding on to that, he's polarizing for other reasons, and I'm a Baker guy. I think that he's the best option that they got next year. But again, I look at the other side of it. When it comes to the Kyler Murray side, Kyler Murray is in the perfect situation for himself. He is in a dome. He has a decent running game behind him. He has DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk this past year. Now he's a free agent. And then you've also had A.J. Green among other receiving options there as well. You're not going to get a better case for Kyler Murray here in Cleveland. I don't think that it's going to happen. But at the same time, too, the Kevin Stefanski offense, it's not a great fit for him at that point. And again, him in this type of an offense, it doesn't make sense. So that's why, I disagree with the Kyler Murray stuff. I know some people have been asking about it, but again, I'm not on board with that. I just don't think it's a good fit. And to be honest, I don't think he's the right fit in this division either. Again, if you're dealing with all of these great defenses that you have to worry about twice a year, I don't think that it's a right fit. And so the Kyler Murray talk, I disagree with, but he is more athletic. Fine, that's one thing. But again, I look at it and just think Baker Mayfield is probably the best option that you're looking at for this season. I know it's unpopular to say here in Cleveland, but that's just the truth. I think that when it comes to building this team, that's what you're looking at. And again, I think that, you look back at the tape at a healthy Baker Mayfield beginning of this season, I think we're having a different conversation if that tackle doesn't happen. So that's where I look at it. If you're complaining about the flag planting, that's one thing, because that's just idiocy. But if you look at, again, the play with him being hurt, fine, you can give me that argument. I disagree with it, but it's a legitimate argument instead of complaining about something that he did 5 years ago.
Yep. And again, this offense doesn't play to Kyler Murray's strengths or Baker Mayfield's strengths. So it's incumbent upon Kevin Stefanski to find some passing offense that does play to Baker Mayfield's strengths, if that's going to be your quarterback. All right, Mac Robinson and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. We will come back talking Browns. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
We continue talking Browns with Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. Time to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, Brown fans. Here's some truth and reason about Odell Beckham. The sports fans have pretty much focused on what's happening on the field, but they should take a look at the management. You have to recognize that Odell Beckham wasn't brought in by the current general manager. And I think what had happened after the 2000 season, they learned that the team could win without him. The lack of targets and the lack of play in this season was pretty much done to make sure he was healthy because they made a decision to deal him. It has nothing to do with Baker Mayfield. The whole play scheme was to keep him healthy, and so they will be able to deal him. The real tragedy in the thing is that he is a good player, and the Browns gave up so much to acquire him, and in the end, they got nothing in return. Just my thoughts.
All right, and again, appreciate the voicemails. The only thing I would say is it doesn't make sense not to throw him the ball if you plan on playing him because his stats are going to be down for the second year in a row. So I don't understand that thought process. The other thing I'll say is Andrew Berry was pretty good about not being your guy, my guy, this guy, that guy. He was, when he took over, he knew he was taking over the Browns, and they were the Browns. It wasn't John Dorsey's Browns versus his Browns. For whatever reason, nobody can figure out why it didn't work in this offense for Odell Beckham, but it didn't.
Right. And that's, I hate to be like, oh, it's as simple as it didn't work. It just didn't work. Like, from a football standpoint, I've tried to break this down as much as I possibly can. I don't have an answer. It just, quite simply, it just didn't work in Cleveland. I don't know why it didn't. I don't know what could have been changed. It just didn't work. And that's a sad reality about it. But again, the fact that they tried their damnedest to, and like you said, if they were just trying to trade him, then wouldn't you want to showcase him at that point? So again, I don't understand the rationale behind that. But again, I think that it comes down to, just the reality of the fact that it just didn't work in Cleveland. And, he goes on to the Rams, plays with Cooper Kupp, opposite of him. He's the number 2 there, and he's able to play well. And you know what? Good for Odell. Good for him. Good for him getting a ring. And I'm happy that it worked out well for him. But at the same time, in Cleveland, it just didn't work out. It just wasn't a good fit. That's all.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm not against Odell. I was thrilled when he was here.
Right.
Didn't like the way he left, but that is what it is at this point. Here's a bigger concern globally. Browns need a receiver. It didn't work out for Odell. If you're a number 1 receiver, you're going to be a little leery of coming into this offense, I think, don't you?
Yeah, and to be honest, that's also why I look at, free agency and think when people are saying, oh, well, you can get your number 1 option out there, or, you can go ahead and trade for this guy. No veteran receiver is going to willingly choose to go into this offense after what happened this past season. That's just a reality there. But that's also why, again, I look at drafting, and not only does it make sense contractually, but it also makes sense because, again, you're bringing somebody in who not only are you choosing to bring into this offense, but it also doesn't really matter at that point whether or not, the fit, at least on their standpoint, really matters. I think that, I look at how the team views him. That's fine. They can bring him in. Great. But you're not trying to court him into coming into Cleveland. At that point, it's just selecting him and moving on with the team as is. So that's where I think that, again, you got to go and get your number 1 in the draft. I think that's not a debate. You have to go ahead and get your number 1 in the draft, and at that point, then you're set. But I think that looking at free agency and thinking, oh, you can get Christian Kirk to be your number 1, or, again, some people wanting Mike Williams, go and get him and to be you're not going to get your number 1 in free agency. That's just not how it's going to work. Again, with the way that it played out this year, I think that your best bet is going through the draft to get your number 1.
Yeah, kind of turned the phrase that Mike Tomlin had when he released Melvin Ingram. We need hostages because it doesn't look like we're going to get many volunteers to play wide receiver in this offense. Mac Robinson, 92.3 The Fan. As always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Mac.
Thank you very much, Dave. Always appreciate the time, my friend.
All right, have a good one. Mac Robinson, 92.3 The Fan. We're going to step aside, turn our attention to the Cavaliers All-Star Weekend happening this weekend in Cleveland. We will talk with Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter for The Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Stay with us.
Life is getting back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for spring classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
at Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We turn our attention to the Cavaliers now on the All-Star break, still among the top 4 or 5 in the Eastern Conference. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason about the Cavs and heading into this All-Star break.
If memory serves me, is this the time where first and second year players in the NBA become physically and mentally tired? Could that be why the Cavs are losing? Thanks.
Let's welcome in Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. And Chris, you know, it's a number of things. Certainly, there's probably a little bit of it. They're getting everybody's best shot now, too. You're not sneaking up on anybody anymore.
Yeah, I mean, Dave, I think there are just like a lot of reasons. I think part of it is collective fatigue, mental and physical. It's been a lot of games in a short amount of time here for the Cavs recently. It's been 50-plus games in the first half of the season, even though we just reached the All-Star break here. And I think it's very, very difficult for a team like the Cavs. We've talked about this throughout the course of the season, Dave. For a team like the Cavs, they have to play extremely hard on a nightly basis. That's their best way of competing. They've got to outwork teams. They've got to out-hustle teams. They've got to play their butts off on the defensive end. It's really hard to play at that kind of level for 82 games in a regular season and then talk about what they would have to do in the postseason. So it's a lot of different things. And some of it you can chalk up to growing pains. Some of it you can chalk up to the fact that they're now the hunted as opposed to the hunter. Some of it you can chalk up to the fact that they haven't had a key piece of their starting lineup, Lauri Markkanen. But at the end of the day, the Cavs are one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference through the quote-unquote unofficial first half of the season. And that's a really good place for them to be.
Yeah, without question. And you know what? Even in the games where they struggle, they still fight. I mean, you know, they fell behind big against Philadelphia. They found a way to come back. They were in it, you know, in the fourth quarter. The other thing to keep in mind, and you know, we touched on it a little bit, these guys are so young, you know. Evan Mobley played 1 year of college basketball. Mm-hmm. There was no game number 50 for Evan last year. Darius Garland played 5 college games. This is really the first time, and he's banged up. So there are just so many things that go into an NBA season that these guys are experiencing for the first time. So give them some room to figure it out.
Yeah, a number of their key guys are figuring this out for the first time, and that's the thing. In the second half of the season, there are going to be a number of different firsts that come their way. And it's interesting because Rajon Rondo has talked about it. Kevin Love has talked about it. There's not a lot of playoff experience on this team. So a lot of these guys are going to be in an atmosphere like Philadelphia, which felt like a playoff environment. It was a raucous arena. Philly talked about how important that game was for them, using the Cavs as a measuring stick for them, not the other way around. So some of these guys, I remember a story from Kyrie Irving back when he first teamed up with LeBron James back in 2014, Dave. And I think it was November or something like that. They were playing against the Chicago Bulls, and Kyrie turns to Mike Miller and he says, "Hey, Mike, is this what a playoff game feels like?" So you can imagine that Darius Garland and Dean Wade and Isaac Okoro and Evan Mobley, they're all turning to Kevin Love and Rajon Rondo and Ed Davis and saying, "Hey guys, like, is this what it's going to feel like in late April when we get into the postseason?" Because you don't know what you don't know. And you can't gain experience without actually going through it, seeing it, and feeling it firsthand.
Yeah, and you know what? Give them time to grow. The one thing about this team, and anytime we've seen them with a challenge, they've responded like you would want them to. Yeah. So let's see. All right. So J.B. Bickerstaff was asked kind of the message that he sent the team to the All-Star break with. Here's J.B. Bickerstaff from last night.
We've done a hell of a job to be in the position that we're in, and that was the message to the guys. The message was also to make sure we take the break and use it wisely. Physically and mentally, we all need to refresh. But this can't be an opportunity where we come back and we're not prepared for what's ahead of us. We need to be one of those teams that's coming out of the break, firing. And so take this time to get your rest, take some downtime, but make sure you're in the gym, make sure you're working on your conditioning and all those things so that coming out of it, we can start fast.
And Chris, I know we've talked about this. Every time I hear him talk, he reinforces he's the perfect guy for a young team like this.
Dave, he just understands what they need to hear in a certain moment. That was the last game before the All-Star break. It was the last meeting that they were going to have officially as a team before going their separate ways. He's been around the NBA long enough to know that was going to be a difficult game regardless, because a lot of guys are already on All-Star break, and it was going to be a mental challenge for them. And it's one that they played okay against Atlanta. They probably would have been better off not giving up 124 points to the Hawks, which is the second most that they've given up this year. But I think he recognizes that wasn't the night to harp on how bad the defense was, right? That wasn't the night to talk about Trae Young going for 41 points and 9 assists and defensive schemes and strategies that need to be better, and whether Caris LeVert is going to get in the starting lineup in the second half of the season as opposed to coming off the bench. There's always a time and place, and I think what he wanted to deliver to the guys was the right message. What you guys have accomplished is really, really something that you should be proud of, given the way that you played last year, 22-50, given the way the previous 2 years went, 19 wins in each of those 2 seasons. Have a recognition of what you've done throughout the first half of the season. Understand now that we're going into a position where the games aren't coming at us fast and furious, understand that you need to take some time to reflect on what it was that got us to this point and how you can help us even more in the second half of the season. And to me, that was the right message, because this has been a wild first half of the season. They've dealt with a lot of different things, and they honestly haven't had a lot of time to exhale or bask in what they've accomplished. And what they've accomplished, to some degree, should be celebrated, given where they were at this time last year.
Absolutely. And get ready, because if you play like you did the first half, the second half could be a whole lot of fun. Chris, Fedor, and I going to step aside, take a quick time out, a couple more voicemails of Truth and Reason. We will also hear more about Caris LeVert. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
In 1966, the Urban League of Greater Cleveland unveils a fair housing program.
It's a program called Operation Equality, in which we are going to marshal the resources to concretely and practically work toward changing residential patterns and racially residential patterns in our community.
Operation Equality becomes a national model for the promotion of non-discriminatory housing.
We continue talking Cavs here on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, and this one about the Cavs.
A lot of Cavaliers fans are split, and I saw on social media a lot of people said, like, they wouldn't want LeBron to come back to the Cavs. And for me, I'm split, because at the same time, I'm a huge LeBron fan, and I would love for him to come back and play for us. But at the same time, I love how the team is playing. Hopefully Colin can come back and contribute, but the Cavs are playing insanely well, and I was just wondering, would you want LeBron to come back, or do you think the Cavs are better off without him? I'm split.
All right. We appreciate the voicemail. Chris, I'm somebody, LeBron has done some wonderful things in Akron. Great guy. I have never been against him for leaving, but at some point in time, as a franchise, you kind of got to move beyond, LeBron. And I think this is the group you kind of move beyond LeBron with. Your thoughts?
Well, first, don't let what happens on Twitter drive your opinion or your decisions. I would say that. That can be a dangerous game to play. The other thing is, at the time that LeBron came back in 2014, the Cavs were preparing for it, and they were making moves in order to satisfy him and in order to fit his salary. And look, at the end of his career, if LeBron decides he's had enough in Los Angeles and he wants to come back to Cleveland in a specific role and fit into the fabric of the team without the team having to break things up, then fine. I have no problem with that. But the organization can't be beholden to LeBron, and they can't have this grand plan that he's the guy who's going to come save them. That's the way that it was in 2014. He was like at the top of the free agent board, and they didn't even put LeBron. They put something else, max player, or something along those lines. For the Cavs, they have a really good thing going. They're establishing an identity and a culture in a post-LeBron era. Darius Garland has talked about establishing a legacy without LeBron. Like, all those things are great, and they should still continue to go down that path. But I've always said, if talent's going to walk through your door, you don't slam it in them.
Yeah, fair enough. But again, don't count on it. Don't build around it.
Right.
I think the way you put it, I would agree with you. If he wants to come and come home and play, his last few years out, great. But there's going to be some contracts that they have to fulfill with Garland and Mobley, and those are the guys that are now, your core. We're going to head back to the voicemail. Truth, we got a lot of them. This one revolves around Caris LeVert.
Hey, this is Dion from Akron talking about the Cavs. I think it's time to start Caris LeVert at the 2-guard spot. Darius Garland still has to handle most of the ball handling, scoring off the dribble. We brought LeVert in to relieve him of that and allow Garland to play off the ball from time to time. Even though I love Okoro and his defense and his ability to cut without the ball, it's time to let LeVert and Garland build that chemistry up as the backcourt. What do you think?
I think JB Bickerstaff's trying to figure that out. Does he play better with Kevin Love and those guys? There's a balance in finding out whose games fit together really well. And JB Bickerstaff has been really good at doing that with this group.
I think the other thing, Dave, is so many people spend so much time talking about starter, reserve. Caris LeVert is playing starters minutes. He's playing with and without starters. He is finishing games at times. So, the starter reserve thing is it's a title. And yeah, there's probably some comfort that's attached to it when you start a game versus coming off the bench. I haven't specifically asked Caris about that. He said from the very beginning when he got here, I'll do whatever it is that the coaches want me to do. I'm trying to fit in. This is still Darius Garland's team. He said all of the right things. So in the second half of the season, I'm going to try and talk to Caris more about what's most comfortable for him. But, the best two-man combination that the Cavs had at the beginning of the season was Darius Garland and Ricky Rubio, and they didn't start together. But they found a way to make it work together. And that's all that matters, is throughout the course of the game, Caris and Darius will play together. Throughout the course of the game, Caris and Kevin Love will play together. Throughout the course of the game, Caris will play with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley and things along those lines. I just think the conversation of starter versus reserve or starter versus backup is highly overrated.
All right, before we let you go, All-Star Weekend coming up. What are you looking forward to covering most? What stories are you? Plug us some stories. What can we look forward to from you All-Star Weekend?
I just think the biggest thing is Darius, Evan, Isaac, Jarrett being in that environment. And if you think about it, this past offseason, Darius was with Team USA, and Darius has spoken throughout the course of this season just about how important that was to his confidence. Being in that environment, surrounded by that caliber player, for these young guys to be in an environment with the league's best And to be viewed as peers of those guys, I think is a huge step for any young team. If you think about what happened when Kyrie made his first All-Star appearance, heck, when Mark Price made his first All-Star appearance, just being in that environment, surrounded by those guys, being able to be looked at that kind of way, I think it's unquantifiable for these kinds of guys. So how they soak that up and what that leads to in terms of their confidence level, in terms of their belief going into the second half, is something that I'm really going to pay attention to.
Chris Fedor, appreciate the time and the insight. Good stuff. Remember, read Chris. He will be covering All-Star Weekend, cleveland.com, as well as the Plain Dealer. Chris, thanks for taking some time with us. Appreciate it, man.
You got it, Dave. Anytime, man.
All right, Chris Fedor. Make sure you read him. Pages of the Plain Dealer. He will have coverage of the Cavs and All-Star Weekend. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow, 4 o'clock. Scheduled guest Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. We'll talk more Cavs. Sports for CLE tomorrow at 4. Have a great night, everybody.